that's what we've done, you know. Super Fuzz Big Muff was just probably an idea we had where we wanted to just play in a band, and that was it, purely that. And we didn't want to like do loads of gigs. We didn't want to make any money of it. We just purely wanted to have fun and stuff, and that is what we done, yeah. And like I say, the only venue that we played was Colville House, and it was a one-off gig, but it was a one-off gig, so that's it really, yeah. It actually went bloody excellent, yeah. The first time I've ever been on stage as well. They actually had a stage there as well, and there was probably over 150 people there. And there's 3 bands on as well, you know. It wasn't just one band on, there's 3 bands on, and the whole day was like, spectacular, you know. It's just great fun, and that's the way music should be, I think, at the end of the day, so. Dan wasn't, he wasn't into skateboarding, which was a very big trend 10 years ago and stuff. He wasn't into that, he was into his music at the end of the day. Well, I knew for a fact that Dan would be a musician no matter what, yeah. That was in his blood, and from a young age, that's ever what to do, so that was that. But Ed, I don't know, I suppose Ed, he might have had other things, but like I say, at the end of the day, we were all young and we didn't really want to, you know, find out what we were going to do in 10 years' time or so, you know, so we didn't really put much thought into it, really. Oh, the majority of the time was, well, actually spent in Ed's bedroom. You know, that's the truth of the day, yeah, we spent a lot of time in there because we were underage to go to pubs anyway, so that was the only place we could go to and stuff. But when we got to around about 17, 18, then we started going down the brewery, which is the local pub where teenagers used to hang out and stuff, and used to go see live bands every Friday and Saturday there as well.
Despite its size, Lowestoft harboured a vibrant live circuit, and it was in venues like the Fighting Cocks and the Brewery that the band members earned their dues in a plethora of musical acts.
I grew up in Lowestoft myself, and you know, it's a pretty cool place to grow up, really. I mean, you've got a beach and loads of arcade machines and all that type of fun stuff, but also, you know, a really busy music scene in terms of, you know, being in bands and being into music, and you know, playing music didn't seem unnatural, at least within the, you know, it seemed like there really was kind of a pretty wide cluster of people who were in different bands, and kind of, you know, it's fairly incestuous in the sense that, you know, I'm sure there was lots of band hopping going on, and you know, also lots of Scrumpy Jack being necked.
There's always been a music thing going on. I mean, you know, when Justin was doing it, when Dan was doing it, you would have all these youngsters, and I mean, I just can't think what age they would have been, but they were 14s and 15s and that sort of thing. Justin was old, obviously. But there were these little cliques that would go around, and there was somewhere to go, there was something going on somewhere that they could go off and do.
Whereas Dan and Ed would mainly perform in cover bands, Justin was already treading a more inventive and comedic path, assuming bizarre personae and delivering unique performances.
I think one of Justin's strangest incarnations, you know, in his formative years as a musician was Bionic Reg, kind of one-man show in which he appeared as a particularly ludicrous superhero with a purple helmet on his head with a cardboard shark's fin coming out of the top. I think it had an R on the front as well, and he was wearing a purple cape. And he would do these one-man shows and occasionally get, you know, random musicians up from the audience to play, you know, a load of nonsense, really.
It was Justin on stage, dressed very bizarrely, rolling around for half an hour. It was hysterical. It was funny. But I have no idea what the idea behind it, the concept was. It was just incredible.
You know, he had like a cardboard penis hanging from his guitar on one occasion, and smeared tomato ketchup over himself to look like blood. You know, and one eyewitness account insists that on for one gig, he was dressed as a tree spirit.
I think Justin always enjoyed what he did. And I think he was serious in his own right. I think he probably wasn't seen as serious because of the way he went about it. But yeah, I would say he was serious, yeah. But it was just so totally different. It's completely different to what anybody else was doing. And to see him play as Plastic Reg, which is the very first time I saw him, is something I'd never seen before. And he was into the whole thing. That was quite serious. But no, I don't know how many people took it seriously. I have no idea. Not many, I wouldn't have thought.
In the early 90s, Justin joined Biff, a local band touring the usual Lowestoft circuit. At this point, however, he was simply a guitarist, and his talents as a frontman would remain undiscovered for years.
Biff were really big at the time in Lowestoft and stuff. Probably because of the fact they played their own stuff and they weren't a cover band, which the majority of bands in Lowestoft are, you know. So yeah, they had a good following and stuff, you know. And but I think all the band members now have left and departed and done other things apart from music, apart from Justin, I should say, who's, you know, carried on his dream of making it famous. Yeah.
Biff would go on to record a couple of demos and kind of, you know, gig around the place. They mainly dealt in cover versions, really. I think they threw a couple of their own songs in there. You know, played a few gigs. They used to do covers of songs like, you know, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and just a really random selection of songs. But that was kind of, you know, very true to the spirit of the Lowestoft scene back then. There were a lot of bands, but you didn't really get the impression, perhaps because they were, you know, they were pretty young, that they were doing it really to get any kind of fame or, you know, any kind of fame or fortune. It was just fun.
In 1991, Biff split up. While Justin would remain in Lowestoft for the next 4 years, Dan took the plunge and moved to London, where he hoped his musical career would take off.
I think that kind of illustrated the difference at the time between the two brothers, because Justin, you know, stayed in Lowestoft. He was still working. He kind of, you know, he was still in loads of bands. There were so many bands that he was in, it's really hard to keep track of them. Bands like Fish Logic, From Their Heads Came, Lung Nugget, apparently, probably for a few weeks, you know, as the mood took him. But Justin didn't seem to have that kind of burning ambition, the same that Dan did. And so he kind of hung around Lowestoft, and he dropped out of his A-levels, Justin, and then he dropped out of Lowestoft College, where he had been doing a media course. And there was a period there where he was, you know, living in a fairly kind of desolate part of Lowestoft with his then girlfriend. And his friends kind of started to worry about him a little bit, because he'd be sitting there all day just watching daytime TV, kind of attempting occasionally to master the jingles that, you know, that he heard. But that would also become quite an important part of his development, because he ended up, you know, recording jingles for real for the likes of IKEA, Tango, Mars bars, you know, after quite a few years. But that was only after he finally left Lowestoft and went to Huddersfield Technical College.
While Justin studied music technology in Huddersfield, Dan struggled in London, working in various minor music industry jobs and supplementing his income with irregular work as a session musician.
Dan spent several years in London, you know, trying to get bands together, you know, putting ads in the local press, trying to find the right musicians, trying to find that right chemistry. And, you know, obviously it eluded him for some time. But all the time he tried to keep himself, tried to keep a day job that at least kept him, you know, really close to the music business.
In 1995, Dan's attempts at forming a band proved fruitful. A respondent to an ad he had placed in the music press was a Scottish bass player who had become both his flatmate and his future bandmate, Frankie Poulain. The first seeds of the darkness had been sown. While Dan and Frankie were forming what would become Empire, the precursor to the darkness, Justin had finished his course in Huddersfield and followed his younger brother south to the capital. Soon he too was enlisted in the fledgling band.
It was only when Dan, Ed and Frankie started the band Empire, you know, and they needed somebody to work synthesizers, that they then thought of Justin, who by that time was kind of, you know, sleeping on Dan and Frankie's sofas, I think, around Shepherd's Bush. So they got him in there, and they couldn't find a singer. So, you know, lo and behold, eventually the penny dropped, and Justin, you know, took the front spot, where